I did something dumb with my Garrett Pro-Pointer. I thought some water got in it, so I opened it up to take it apart. And you can see the little lever though, how it goes from one to the other. And I ended up losing one of the pieces, so I'm going to send it back to Garrett. I already have my RFID, whatever it's called, my whatever the number that they give you that you can return it, because you can't just send something back to them. You have to actually call them up and you get like a referral ID. So I'm going to send it back, but before I do, I thought maybe in case anybody wanted to see what it actually looks like inside, I'll show it to you. So I put the pieces in a bag so that I wouldn't lose any more. But basically, you already know how to change the battery. You unscrew the cap, okay? And inside, if you look, let's see how I can show this to you. Inside is one screw, which I've already removed. And the screw goes right in there, okay? So you unscrew that with a skinny screwdriver, and once you do that, this piece here actually slides out. Now, this is the part that you want to do carefully, okay? This is the part where I messed up. This rubber button, it's just a piece of rubber. But on the other side of the rubber, it comes into contact with a very small electronic switch. And you don't want to damage that switch. So when you slide this out, what happens is that rubber causes friction on the switch, and the switch is right here. And you can see what just happened. The switch came apart as I pulled it out, causing the spring to come loose. Put that right there. This is the screw. And also causing the top of the switch to pop out, because if you look inside, here's the rubber button, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this without a flashlight. I may have to get a flashlight, and I will. I'm going to show you where this drags and comes into contact with this. So when you pull it out, you kind of rip the top off if you're not careful. I'm going to get a flashlight and show you what it looks like inside here. Okay, you see that circular piece of rubber all the way in the back? Alright, there's the switch right there, and if you look in there, you can see the other end of the switch. When you pull this thing out, that rubber comes into contact with the electronic switch that's on the board right there, okay? And you just rip the top right off because it's fragile. And you can see, and I'm going to show you, I know this is bad camera work, but I'm going to show you I'm doing everything one-handed. Okay, you can see that the board actually slides into two grooves. There's a groove right in here. You can see the two highlights on the plastic, one on top of the other, that the board itself slides into. And there's another one on that side, here and here. Right there and there. The board slides into that. Okay? And when it does slide into that, that creates a certain distance between this electronic switch and the piece of rubber here that comes into contact with the switch. Let me just regulate little bear for a second. Hey bear! Hey bear, no more. Little bear. No more. that's enough. So, as I slid this board out like that, the top of this right here caught on this piece of rubber, because that's what comes into contact with that, and it just ripped the piece of plastic off. And it was no big deal at first, because I had the pieces. I found them all loose inside here. I shook this and I heard something rattling around. So I found this, I found the spring, and then I attempted to put it back together, and something wasn't quite right. And then I realized that there was another couple of pieces that came apart, one of which is this here, which you can't really see too well, and I'm going to pop it out for you so you can. But it's a metal contact plate that sits on this little socket. I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, that's what it looks like. It's a really tiny piece of metal. It's like a little bent piece of metal that fits over the plastic, and those three prongs are what provide the contact. So don't lose that. Now, before I get into the workings of this switch, because if you have to put this back together, there's at least 3 or 4 ways to put it together incorrectly, alright, and it won't work. Before I get into that, let's just take a look at the board. This here, just like on a cell phone, this is your little motor that causes the vibration. So this little propeller here, it spins, and because notice that the weight, it's a propeller, but the weight, if you look at it, is favored on one side. See? So this side here is heavier than this side. It's just a motor that spins, but because of the weight favoring one side over the other, it causes it to wobble, which is what a vibrator is. Alright, it's just a motor. You can make one out of any motor. It's a motor where the propeller is not properly balanced, just like a ceiling fan that's missing a blade or something. So when this spins, it causes it to wobble, and that's what the vibrator is right there. Okay, and it just gets power from there and there. This here, this is your little speaker. Alright, no big deal, and you can see it's coming up, but it's got this little rubber patch on it, and that rubber patch is what comes into contact with this here to hopefully prevent water from getting in by creating a seal. Alright, so that's why this is here, and you can see mine, I must have damaged from taking it in and out. You can see that the adhesive on it is starting to peel off, but that's pretty simple. That's all that is right there. Next, we have the LED, which is right here, and if you look closely, that also has that little piece of rubber on it, which also hopefully causes a waterproof seal when it comes into contact with this flat piece right over here. And if we flip it over, we just see a whole bunch of electronics that I know nothing about. Basically, that's the circuitry, and you can see that there are 3 wires there, 2 reds and a black, which go to the tip of the pinpointer via a long, stiff black cable. So if you notice, when I was first trying to pull this out, it was like just kind of springing. It didn't want to come out right away. That's because that's a really stiff cable in there. Alright. And then here and here, those are your 2 metal solder points which make contact with the 9-volt battery. So, getting back to this guy. If you look really closely, you can see on the inside is a little metal, what looks like a metal lever right there. Alright, that's what causes the spring action on the switch. Alright, so you press it once, it turns on. You press it a second time, it turns off. If you put the switch back together incorrectly, it's not going to be an on-off switch, it's going to be a momentary switch. A momentary switch means you press it, and as long as you hold it down, it'll stay on, but when you release it, it's going to turn off, okay? And that's not necessarily what you want. So if you put this piece of plastic back in there the wrong way, that's what it's going to do. It's going to be a momentary switch, a momentary push-button switch, not an on-off switch. I had to put this thing together about 3 or 4 times before I got it right. And basically what happened, I'll tell you what happened. I had to put it together about 4 times. The first time I put it together, I put this thing on backwards. The second time, I realized I forgot the spring. I didn't even realize it was in there. The third time, I didn't realize that I still had this little tiny metal piece to make the contact. And then the fourth time, I got it perfectly right. Everything was just great. But I realized I was missing one piece. And that one piece is that once you get the whole thing together, there's a retainer clip, a plastic retaining clip that fits on top of the switch. And it holds everything together and prevents it from shooting all over the place, like a jack-in-the-box. And I was doing it on the floor, which wasn't smart. There was a dog, and there were 3 kids around, all right? Like little kids, like 3, 4 years old. The oldest might have been 8. They were running around, playing on the couch. There was a dog, and there was me on the floor, and I lost the piece. I don't know where it went, so that was my bad. Anyway, pinpointer works fine, but there's no point in me putting it back together, because as soon as I go to push the switch, sooner or later the spring is going to just shoot off, and I'm going to have a bunch of loose parts inside here, and it's going to be useless. So I'm setting it back to Garrett to fix. So if you're thinking about taking apart your pinpointer for whatever reason, be aware that when you take it out, there's going to be tiny parts that may shoot out, right? So don't get them lost. They're probably going to be inside here loose. You'll hear them rattling around, okay? But just remember, you have the spring, you have that plastic piece, and you have that other little metal plate. I'm going to try to put this back together now just so you can see what it looks like. Okay, now here's the switch, the push button part. And if you look, on one side there's a little square on the lower part, okay? And on the other side there's also a little square. So it looks like it doesn't matter which side you put it in, but that's not the case. Because if you look at it from the bottom, you'll see that one side has a little U cutout shape and the other side does not. So you can't put this back in any which way. This has to go in a certain way. Okay, here's the little metal contact plate with the 3 positions on it. And if you look at the other side, you see that there's one square notch cut out. That square notch is what's going to fit over that square notch right there on the plastic push button. I'm going to put this together and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so that kind of goes on there, and if you look inside you can see the little square piece of plastic that goes inside the square cutout of the contact. Now this part of the switch, that's the front, and you see all those little cutouts? Alright, that's where that little wire lever is going to go in, because each time you press this down it's going to flip back and forth inside those little cutout pieces of plastic on the front, and it's kind of hard to describe, so I'll try to put it back together so you can see. By the way, I almost forgot the spring. The spring goes right inside this part, right in there. So the spring goes in there, and the other side of the spring is going to sit right over that right there. There you go. Okay? There's nothing holding this together right now. If I flip this over, that spring's going to fall out, so it's working really, really small. Now, I happen to remember, because I've already done this, that there's actually 2 metal contacts. One that goes on one side right there, and there's another one that goes on the other side. And I just noticed that it's not here. So, I just took a peek inside here, and sure enough, I can see it. Inside if you look on the right side, right about there, you can see a little shiny piece of metal stuck to some of the oil in there. So I have to get that out. Now, if I didn't already know that that piece existed, I would have put it back together and forgotten all about that piece. So I got to get that little piece out. Okay, I just dragged it out with my screwdriver. You can see it there. It's so light that any little bit of adhesive prevents it from coming out. I'm shaking it, it's still not coming out. It's just kind of stuck in there. So I'm going to have to grab it. There it is. That's the second metallic contact that's got to go on the switch. So, don't forget, you have 2 of those. Now I'm going to put that back on here. Oh, and that one just fell off. You see how annoying this is? So give me a second, I got to put both of those back on. Okay, I got them both on. By the way, before, when I put that metal contact on, you may remember that I actually had it the other way, with the folded part facing up. I think it's actually supposed to be with the folded part facing down, like that. But again, I'm not sure. I got it to work before, and I think this is how it was when it was working. There's nothing holding them on except friction and that little square piece of plastic that fits in the hole. So these could still fall off at any time, and they're really easy to damage and bend. You can see this side, the metal's a little bent already. Here it is with the spring sitting in there. Again, just friction. That spring could fall off. I got to get this into the socket of the switch. Okay, again, looking at the socket, don't forget where that metal piece goes into the base. That's the rear, that's where the spring is going to go. And in the front, where you can see the little lever, that's going to fit right into that little grooved section right here. And there goes my spring. That's going to fit right in there. So this is the front. That's the back. So this is going to go in there like this, right? Whoop. Not, yeah, like this. Not like this, because that's the spring side, which is the rear. But like that. It may help if you have some tweezers. Okay, this is how it's going to line up. Metal plate on that side for the contacts, metal plate on that side for the contacts. Spring is in the back, and you can see the plastic trigger trough that's cut out in the front. But now the tricky part is I got to get that metal lever to go inside the plastic. If I push this down right now, it's just going to crush that metal lever, and I can't do that. So I got to dig that out and get it to fit in the front. Okay, now you can see I've moved that little metal lever so that it's dead center. So hopefully now, and I'm doing this one-handed camera, one-handed, basically my fingers. So I may have to do this off camera, but basically you want to get that to fit right in that notch. Bam. Okay, you see that? I'm going to keep my finger on it because I don't want this to go jack in the box and shoot all the way across the deck and land somewhere down who knows where. So, keeping my finger on it, but you can see what the trigger mechanism looks like for this switch. Press it once, press it a second time. Press it once, press it a second time. It stays in that notch, see? Once, second time. Now, again, what holds this whole thing together is a little plastic. It's a little plastic, I guess it's there's no way to describe it, but like a bracket that fits over this whole switch. Alright? the bracket is shaped like this, and it fits over it like that, and there's a hole in the top for the switch, and it grips it so that all the spring and everything doesn't go shooting up. That's the piece that I lost. So you can see where it would go. It covers this whole area. You can see the little ridge around here where the plastic retaining clip would sit, and it locks right under here. So it clips over the front, sits around this square, goes over there like that. And the way the switch works, there's really no way you can modify this with like gummo or epoxy or anything, because the whole thing moves. See? So once you lose that little retaining clip, there's really nothing that's going to prevent this from just shooting all over the place. I'm going to get a battery. I'm going to put the battery in here, and you're going to see this still works. Okay. I got my battery in there. I'm going to press this. Oh, 1 second. Hold on. Okay, right now it's not working, and I think I know why. Let me pop this back out. Okay, I think I found the problem. I think the orientation was correct, but if you remember, this one was a little bent. I think it was bent too much inward and it wasn't making contact. So I just bent it out a little bit with my tiny screwdriver, and I'm going to put it in the same way, and we'll see if it works. Okay, it's intermittently turning on and then not turning on, so I'm attempting to separate the pins a bit with this tiny knife, just to stretch them apart, because they kind of got a little squished together. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm separating them so they stick out just a little bit more, because they have to come into contact. That's why they're called contacts. They have to come into contact with, if you look on the side, on the inside of that plastic, you can see the metal traces on the side wall there. They have to make contact with that right there. So hopefully that should do the trick. Okay, I bent them out a little bit more. You can see them sticking out. So they should make better contact with the side wall. And hopefully now it should work. Alright, I got it this time. Battery just popped out, so let me see if I can use my pinky to hold the battery in. There we go. You heard it beep, right? Battery keeps slipping out. It's working. So, that was it. Those little traces were just a little too bent. Now, and it just came all apart. You see what I'm talking about? Sometimes it doesn't pay to take things apart. But you see how it works. Now, just because I'm determined and stubborn, even though I am sending this back, I'm going to get this back together and get it working, so at least we can just see it working while it's opened, just because, why not? Alright, I got it back together. I'm going to attempt to turn it on. I have my little baby multi-tool there, so that should activate the Pro-Pointer, and you should see the vibrator start to spin, causing the vibration. You should see the light come on, and you'll hear it if everything is working. So here we go. Yeah, this battery keeps popping out. It's hard to do this all one-handed. But you get the idea. Again, it's this intermittent beeping. I think It's still not making good contact right now. If the retaining clip was on here, it would be holding everything in place. And it's not. So it's not always making a good connection. You can see the little metal traces, they're already getting a little bent. I'm trying to wiggle it to get a good seat on it. There it is. Okay, it's on. I'm going to take away the metal because I just kind of calibrated it to see metal. And now by the way, this is just a dummy piece of rubber. It doesn't do anything. You know, again, this is the switch. So that's the fragile thing. It's not heavy duty. It feels heavy duty when you when you look at it here. But this is how fragile that little switch is. All you're doing is pushing it in and out with this rubber piece. All I'm doing to turn it off and on right now is just pushing the battery in and out. I only have so many hands. Oh. And I popped it apart again. Frustrating. Again, I don't care. It's going back to Garrett. They're going to fix it. I think just to look at it, they said they were going to charge like $30 or $35. I don't know. I don't know how much that little switch is going to cost. If you wanted to modify this switch, you should know that it is a 6-pin switch. You can see the pins right here. I'll point them out to you in case you can't. But basically you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6-pin switch. It's not a momentary switch, it's what's called a latching switch because of that little metal latch right here that flips back and forth. And I did not test it to see if it's dual pole, dual throw, or single pole, dual throw, or anything like that. I probably should know what it is just by me fooling around with it, but at this point I don't even care. I did measure it, and from the looks of it, it looks like it's approximately 5 millimeters. Let's measure the back. Again, I'm doing this one-handed, but it looks like it's just about 4.5 millimeters. Little bear. Hey, bear. No more. No more. Little bear hates the UPS guy. Well, he hates the sound of the truck. So, yeah, like 4.5 millimeters. That way, and about 4.5 or 5 millimeters the other way. If you wanted to desolder those and just replace the switch, that's what you would need. I actually looked to buy this switch, not because I was going to resolder it, but just because I was going to cannibalize that stupid little plastic retainer clip that fits over this thing like that. You can see the shape of it. That indentation, that's the shape of the clip. So the clip would have been right in here, and it would have went over it to the other side. So yeah, simple piece of plastic. You could also probably just solder on a better switch or a bigger switch, something a little more heavy duty. At one point I got it to work without the spring, and it was a momentary switch, as I said before. So you could probably even make it a momentary switch so that you can't accidentally leave it on. You hold it down to turn it on, and then you release it to turn it off. But then, you know, it's got that calibration thing, so I don't know how that would work. You don't want to be constantly holding it in, because then, you know, it's like you hold it near a piece of metal, and then you recalibrate it, and then you desensitize it so you can pinpoint it even better with that. I don't know if you know that trick, but yeah, so I don't know if that would be the best thing to change the type of switch. But anyway, I'm sending it back. I just thought it might be useful to somebody to see what's actually going on inside this thing. And that's it. Oh, before I forget, I have the weird habit of taking things apart and not putting them back together again. I just have this like addiction to taking things apart. I just like to know how things work. So if you like taking things apart, or if at least you want to see what's going on inside of stuff, subscribe to the channel, because I'm constantly disassembling things. So thanks for watching. Little Bear.